This is the story of Cold War and what caused it. At the end of the Second World War in 1945, much of the world was in ruins. Cities across Europe had been destroyed. Millions of people had died. Nations were exhausted after years of global conflict. But even as the war ended, a new and dangerous rivalry was beginning. Two powerful nations emerged as the dominant forces in the world. One was the United States. The other was the Soviet Union. These two countries had fought on the same side against Nazi Germany, but their political systems and visions for the future were completely different. The United States supported democracy, free elections, and capitalist economies. The Soviet Union promoted communism, where the state controlled political power and economic resources. After the war, these differences quickly created tension. The Soviet Union expanded its influence across Eastern Europe. Countries such as Poland, Hungary, and East Germany fell under Soviet control. In response, Western nations grew concerned that communism would spread across the continent. This growing rivalry became known as the Cold War. It was called cold because the United States and the Soviet Union never fought each other directly in a full military war. Instead, they competed through political influence, military strength, intelligence operations, and technological achievements. One of the most dangerous aspects of the Cold War was the development of nuclear weapons. In 1945, the United States had demonstrated the power of atomic bombs during the final days of World War II. A few years later, the Soviet Union successfully developed its own nuclear weapons. Soon, both countries were building massive arsenals of nuclear missiles. These weapons were capable of destroying entire cities within minutes. The fear of nuclear war became a constant reality. Schools practiced emergency drills. Governments built underground bunkers. People worried that a global conflict could begin at any moment. During the Cold War, several major crises brought the world close to disaster. One of the most serious occurred in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviet Union secretly placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, a small island nation located only about 150 kilometers from the United States. When American leaders discovered the missiles, the situation escalated rapidly. For 13 tense days, the world watched as the United States and the Soviet Union prepared for the possibility of nuclear war. Warships moved into position. Military forces were placed on high alert. Eventually, negotiations between the two sides prevented a catastrophic conflict. The Soviet Union agreed to remove the missiles from Cuba, and the United States promised not to invade the island. The crisis ended peacefully, but it demonstrated how close the world had come to nuclear destruction. Beyond military tensions, the Cold War also became a competition for global influence. Both superpowers tried to spread their political systems across the world. They supported different governments and groups in conflicts throughout Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Wars in Korea and Vietnam became major battlegrounds in this global rivalry. The Cold War also extended into science and technology. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union launched the first artificial satellite into space. This event shocked the United States and began the space race. Both nations competed to achieve major milestones in space exploration. In 1969, the United States achieved one of the most significant victories in this competition when astronauts landed on the moon. Despite decades of rivalry, fear, and political tension, the Cold War eventually began to weaken. By the 1980s, economic problems and political pressures were affecting the Soviet Union. Reforms introduced by Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev attempted to modernize the country and reduce tensions with the West. In 1989, one of the most symbolic events of the Cold War occurred. The Berlin Wall, which had divided East and West Germany for decades, was opened and later demolished. This moment represented the collapse of communist control in Eastern Europe. Just 2 years later, in 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved. The Cold War had come to an end. For nearly half a century, the world had lived under the shadow of nuclear conflict. Two superpowers had competed for influence, power, and global leadership. Although the Cold War never turned into direct war between the United States and the Soviet Union, it shaped international politics, technology, and global alliances for generations. It was a period defined by tension, competition, and the constant fear that the next crisis might trigger a conflict capable of destroying the world. The Cold War ended without nuclear war, but its legacy continues to influence global politics even today.